Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ethex Cuppa Club. On this sunny day, I hope you're breaking from the garden and you're home. I will introduce him very shortly, but we'll just wait for a few more people to join. Good morning, welcome. This is the Ethex of Ethex. We've done a few of these now, haven't we? And we normally do them in the format of either having a panel that we talk to, or we get to meet specific businesses that are listing on the platform. And today I'm joined by Joel Teague, who is one of the directors of Co Charger. So welcome, Joel. Nice to see you here.
Thank you.
Just a bit of housekeeping. We're going to be talking to Joel about the organisation, and it's going to give you more information about what they're doing and how they came about and the people involved in the organisation. But this isn't a financial promotion in any way. It's just an information gathering exercise. And obviously, we can't answer any specific questions relating to people's personal financial circumstances. If you need any help with getting a financial advisor, then we can always recommend some after the event, and we will send out a follow-up email with any useful resources that you might need to get further clued up on the whole EV sector. So Joel, hi, welcome to you. Thanks for being with us today.
Pleasure.
So I'm just going to first, and just to say sorry to the participants, you can submit questions via the chat function all the way through the webinar, and I'll feed those into Joel as we go. We're set for about 45 minutes chat today, but we'll keep it short and sweet. Sorry, here we go. So Joel, tell us a bit about Co Charger. How did it come about? And for some of those investors and community members of Ethex, they'll know Co-Cars, which is in your family. So just tell us about how that all fits together and how you came about.
Okay, well, yeah, the original idea was personal experience. I got convinced by a neighbour about 6 years ago to have a go in his electric car, and he did convince me, and I ordered it. And the problem was it arrived, but the charger, there's a note saying the charger will be another 6 weeks, and in a small village with no chargers, 7 miles from the nearest public one, that wasn't great. And the solution was to drive it back to that neighbour's on the way home from work once a week, plug it into his charger, stick a £5 note through the door and walk home. So a few years later, when, like all EV drivers, I became an enthusiast, and I wanted to understand why more people weren't doing it, it became clear that the usual perceived barriers of cost and range would disappear, as they pretty much have now. And that would leave the barrier that I'd encountered on a short-term basis, but on a long-term basis. And we did some research. Over half of UK motorists can't have a charger at home because they don't have a driveway, it's rented, it doesn't have the right electricity set up, whatever. And that makes running an EV quite difficult. In fact, it makes it a lot harder. And we found that the research shows pretty clearly, if you haven't got a means to charge at home, then until you have got the dependability and convenience and cost advantages of charging while you're at home or at work, you're not going to make the leap. And that's about 15 million drivers. So that's where the concept came from. I already knew of Co-Cars from just living around in Devon. So I gate crashed a meeting where I knew Mark Hodgson would be and tapped him up and convinced him to welcome us into the fold and help get this launched. So 2 years later, it's up, it's working, people are using it, people have ditched their diesels because of it. So all very good so far.
That's brilliant. In terms of the other people, sorry, there's a bit of an echo. In terms of the other people that are part of the organisation, helping to really grow this and get it going, tell me a bit more about those people who are working with you on this organisation.
Right, well, we managed to get a very good team very early on. There's an ex-boss of mine who is a bigwig in car retail, who's been very well involved, obviously stitching ourselves into the automotive sales market is very important, and we're doing very well with that. Got an announcement on that probably next week. Managed to convince through the online EV forums. I got talking to an amazing chap called Sam Routledge, who co-founded a very large IT company called Softcat, and he's been a brilliant help in all of this, and really knows his stuff when it comes to building a secure and scalable IT setup, and also knows a thing or two about building £1 billion business. Mark Hodgson, obviously, the important thing to us is that this is part of a wider context, and that our real mission is, if you really have to own a car, then make it electric. But beyond that, do you really need to own a car? So things like co-cars and co-delivery and so on. And Mark is very good at making sure he keeps us on the straight and narrow, and focused on the real objective here, which is stop burning stuff. Let's see, who else have we got? So Lyndon Majors is our IT boss and head of development. He actually runs an app development company in Devon, and they've been absolutely superb in putting this together. Really knows what makes a good app tick and how to put that together so that it's scalable. Yeah, so great stuff. The other very big player in this is Lee Hudson, our Chief Operating Officer, who's got great experience not only in the sort of day-to-day operations of app-based businesses, but in fundraising. And he put together, I think it was a £14 million fundraiser for a parking app not too long ago, and he's been a driving force in this. Absolutely brilliant, and very switched on when it comes to scaling things. So we've got a great team, and we've got a business development manager on board, and I can't tell you yet, but we think we've just landed the most amazing marketing manager. So it's going very well. The team's exactly what you always want.
That's excellent. In terms of the actual business, tell us how it works. So I do actually have an electric vehicle. So how would I go about engaging with you, and what would be my customer journey? Okay, so do you have a charger at home? We do. You do, okay. So you're one of the lucky ones, same as me. So you get the app for free, you download it, and when you create an account, you tick the I want to be a host option, and that takes you through setting up a profile, which includes where you live, what sort of charger you've got, although they're almost all the same now, and how much you want paying per active hours use of that charger, and a minimum amount per session. That will be then made available to verified chargee accounts. So if there's somebody, say 3 streets away in a block of flats, and they want to buy an EV and they can't because they don't know how to charge it, they set up a chargee account. I live here, I've got this sort of car, and it will put you two in touch, send messages. It will allow that person to request a booking, and that can be either a one-off, or more likely it's going to be a weekly recurring booking. You can book a whole year in advance, because that's how you use an EV. It's like a mobile phone, except you don't plug it in every day, you plug it in about once a week. So they may book, say, from 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night till 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning when they go to work. And the app looks after all that arrangement, the bookings, the reminders, so you know to park away from your charger, reminds them to come, and they just plug in, use the app to set the charge session going, go home to bed, come back and pick it up, and the app will work out how long the charger was running for, using data on the charger and on the car, and some photo evidence that the app forces you to use to prove the state of the battery when you plugged it in. And if you unplug it before it's finished, you have to do the same again. So it does some fairly clever maths to work out how to do that. Very importantly, it's independent of the charger. We've made it freestanding for good reason, so that we don't end up with technical issues with different protocols to different chargers. And it looks after that for you, and it just takes credit card payment at the end of the charge. Once you, the host, have approved it and said, yes, that looks right to me, it takes credit card payment from the chargee. It takes 12% off for us and the VAT man and the banks, and then the rest gets paid to you, the host. All very, very simple, very deliberately. Yeah, typically, I mean, do you have like an average user? What would be the average amount that someone would look to earn over the course of the year? Well, the average charge, I mean, they're generally between about 4 and 15 quid. It's averaging out. We expected it to average out. An average user and an average car and average miles is going to be paying about £9 to £10 per session, which actually works out, considering you haven't had to pay for a charger because yours wasn't cheap.
it's about 2 or 3 years before they've paid as much as you do as a host. So it's very cheap charging. A host, it depends on your electricity supply, obviously. If you built up to, say, 4 chargees that are doing typical charges once a week, you're going to make between £400 and £1,200 a year. That's pretty decent money, but you know, it's your charger. You've paid a lot of money for it, so why not?
Right. So it's, you know, it's a meaningful amount of money, and you know, you would hope that that's enough interview to share their driveway with people. What are the barriers?
Well, the first one is the driveway. If you only have enough space to park your one car and you can't move it to anywhere else easily, that knocks a few out. There are some geographical areas where, you know, everybody's got a driveway around here. There's no point. Nobody's within walking distance. But the interesting thing is the proportions. The Donor Analytics, a really good analytic company in this space, they worked out that if we can just get 4%, 1 in 25 charges shared, that actually plugs the gap of how many charges we need. And the wonderful thing is it scales. So we're only actually after, in fact, our modeling is based on 1.3, and that's plenty of profit, thank you. But obviously the opportunity is there to get a much higher proportion of charges. The other blockers aren't interested in sharing, to put not too fine a point on it. But what we're finding from talking to, you know, we're part of SMMT and the EV group there, and we're talking to the big car companies, and we're finding that one of the big barriers they get is perceived cost of an EV. Even though all the analysis shows it's cheaper overall to have a new EV than a new fuel car, there's that perceived cost. And what the salesmen are doing now is saying, look, you can earn £100 a month off the charger. And that is a really good deal maker, because the average EV driver is no longer your quite affluent, you know, I'm going to spend £70,000 on a car. It's Renault Zoes and it's you know, VW ID3s at most, and there's sub £20,000 EVs now. To those people, anything that closes the gap is going to make a big difference. So it's actually quite a good sales tool to those people.
Excellent. I mean, from personal experience, it's interesting because we want to go away and take our EV car on holiday around the UK, but whilst we have a charger at home, we might not have a charger where we're going, or even a driveway actually. So this whole concept works, you know, not just at home, it also, you know, works when you're on the move, which is quite interesting.
It does, but this is a really important point on this business model. There's 3 different types of charging, and we come across this a lot, because there's only one way of fueling a fuel car. You stop on the way there, you stick a nozzle in the side and you squirt juice into it. There are 3 different types of vehicle charging. That route charging, that's the equivalent to electric fuel pumps, that's only 3% of charging. Because let's face it, if you had a magic fuel pump in your garage that fueled your car for you while you slept and it only cost 10p a litre, how often would you go to the fuel station? So 90% of charging happens at what we call base charging, and that's what we look after. There's also what you just described, which is destination charging. While I'm there, I'll plug in at the gym, at Tesco's, whatever. They're very, very different use cases. It's a little bit like the difference between a Ferrari and a Land Rover. There have been charger sharing apps for a very, very long time, none of them really doing much because they're a tiny edge case. That are destination chargers. They are for EV drivers when they're away. They will become more important over time as there's more EVs on the road. That is a very different use case. It's strangers away from home. There's different legals, there's different security, there's different functionality. There's no repetition to it. It's a totally different thing to community charging. And that's a term we invented. It's now an industry standard. Community charging happens before you buy the car. Community charging is what enables your neighbour to say, great, I'll get rid of my diesel and I'll buy that EBR one. And it's a really key differentiator, not just because it's the one that gets people to stop burning fuel, which is what we're trying to achieve, but it also financially is the one that makes the money. Because while you might, I mean, I've been signed up for PlugShare and Zap Home for 5 years and I've never had a phone call. You might occasionally make a tenner off that when someone's really stuck and they can't find a public charger. This is the same person every week for a full battery charge. So it's a completely different business, different monetization, different target audience. So those apps talk to EV owners. They're a sort of nice to have on the end of once you've got an EV. We are there to create the customers for those apps, if you see what I mean. It's a really important differentiator. We were offered right at the beginning one of those apps to adapt, and we looked at it, and there wasn't a single component we wouldn't have to change. So we started completely blank sheet and built it. Got a strategy, which is be really good at one thing that matters. We've stuck to community charging, and it's proven absolutely spot on. It's given us that first mover advantage because the industry is only just starting to cotton on to that key difference. And while there are people who would quite like to pivot and, you know, and do what we're doing, they are way behind because it is so different. It's even shocked us how different destination and base charging are when it comes down to the whole business, not just the app. So yeah, good point. Sorry to drone on, but it's a really important one.
No. And in terms of, sorry, there's a bit of echo there. Maybe you can mute while I ask a question.
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, because that is really good to just clarify. And, you know, in terms of geography, you're based in the Southwest, you're talking about community, and presumably at first, locality-wise, you're growing in that locality, but geographically, how do you expect to grow? And, you know, how do you see that transition?
The original idea was to pilot this in and around Exeter, and because it's a matter of critical density. You need people who are within walking distance of each other, a chargee and a host, and that was easier to do by constraining it geographically. And that was the idea, and then COVID happened. We started developing 2 weeks before the first lockdown, and the pivot we had to do was to say, you know what, let's use this time to continue the land grab and actually just recruit nationally. And that's worked very well. We're quite a long way ahead of target on that. I think we technically qualify as the 5th biggest charging network in the country now. We've got more community chargers than Tesla have destination chargers, and that's worked really well. We still have that density thing, but we're so far ahead of everybody else. It's daft. So we started as local. We had to pivot to go national, and now there are great big gaps where it's just not needed. You know, the Highlands of Scotland, if you live there, you've probably got a driveway anyway. There's great bits in the very rural areas, but we've got a huge number of users in London. Yeah, we've got a host in Canary Wharf. You know, we've got fantastic coverage now, and it's gone national. It is mainly the cities, but we're also finding in the big commuter towns as well. It's going very, very well. We've got a 6-channel acquisition plan that's working very well to keep building that.
Great, thanks, Joel. And a question from the audience coming in, interesting question. So I suppose the host needs to disclose that the use of their driveway and charger to their insurance company. How does it work in terms of insurance?
Yeah, we spent quite a lot of time and quite a lot of money on litigation lawyers and so on to check into this. The answer was quite banal. In terms of the law, it's pretty much business as usual. It's the same as if you sell something on eBay, someone comes to your door and they trip up on your hose pipe. There's a liability. If the chargee's car damages your property, their car insurance has to cover it because it's part of running the car. House insurance will normally cover it, but there are some, shall we say, less customer-friendly policies that will try not to. So we do tell all hosts, check your insurance policy. It is extreme. It's never happened, but you know, it's advisable to check it because not every policy will cover something like that. In the same way, it's not covering you right now if someone trips over something in your garden or your dog bites them. So it's under the same as that.
Okay, another question for you. How do you manage the IT admin when there are IT connection or errors in payment or transfer of the correct money? I don't want to have to learn to be an expert in this. So can you make it easy for me?
That was fun. No, we went straight to Stripe because they are the absolute obvious market leaders on doing this kind of thing. When it comes to security, we tick 2 major red flags because we're introducing people physically to each other. We're taking money from people and paying it to other people. So we have to do an extreme amount of hoop jumping to meet all the anti-money laundering laws and security laws and so on. So we use Stripe. And actually what we've had to do is a huge amount of error handling. So the app basically won't let you start a charge unless it can be sure that it's got that signal to do the transaction. We will be building in an offline function later, but not until this has been running for a while and we understand the sort of edge cases we get. But yeah, basically the Stripe system enables us to deal with that after the case. So if there's any kind of problem, there's nothing the user has to do. It will just flag it up to us and we can then re-trigger that payment. It hasn't happened. It's all gone very well. But yeah, dealing with those edge cases has been very important. The important thing to realize is that the host is given control. So the host has to accept a booking, but also at the end of each session, the data is flagged up. You know, this is what happened. They started at this time, finished at that time. Here's the calculation. Here's how much you're going to get paid. And they've got a query button, which has been used twice. I think it was once because a charger just didn't connect properly and they had to nullify the session, and another time because someone had put the wrong battery size in their profile. So there's a query button there if there's any problems. So far, a couple of uses. So generally, we try to do it so that there's so little to do, especially for the chargee, because we want the experience for the chargee to be pretty much the same as having their own charger at home, just with a longer walk to their front door. And that means make it simple. So for instance, if you do an overnight session, you don't even have to end the session, just get charged to 100%, work out how long that took, do the payment. So it's all very nice and simple because it's every week. You don't want to be doing lots of clicks.
Yeah. So let's come back to that question that was posted right at the beginning, actually, and then we're going to talk about expansion, you know, world domination and global expansion. So question from Helen, how does this app differ from the Zap app or similar app? I can contact local people offering their charging points and establish an arrangement. What is the value added of this scheme?
Okay, well, that comes back to that BRD model, a base route destination model. ZapMap is the king of route and destination. They've got Zap Home with that, which is very much destination charging with home chargers. We're very friendly with them. One of their directors is a host of ours and has both, and we encourage people to have both apps because ZapMap is for EV owners. There won't be enough EV owners if we don't get the base charging sorted for those people. So our job is to give a viable base charging option to people who can't have chargers at home. Those people will then use ZapMap. But we are talking to them. There are obvious synergies there to try and give the motorist a nice seamless experience. And obviously we're working with Good Energy, their owner, on projects in Bristol and so on. It's all very friendly and collaborative, and they're good people to work with.
Good. Thank you. So let's talk about expansion. First of all, what's the context? What's happening globally? So is this model working elsewhere already? And what kind of, you know, development are we seeing? And then what's your thinking in terms of expanding overseas? Presumably you want to crack your home market first, but tell us about the potential.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Get it right in the UK first. Learn all the different models. There are various different ways of doing this. We've got a huge piece of work going on with fleet, which is a massive market for us. There's various things we've got to get right, but one of the main things we'll be doing with this C+ funding is we're starting to look. We've had approaches from 10 countries so far. We need to pick them carefully. We've started looking at some countries in Europe, and we need to be starting to look at the USA and evaluate different business models for getting it abroad. Because although we're not aware of anybody else in the world doing this, everybody is obsessed with route and destination charging. That light bulb hasn't gone on around the world yet. We're aware that we need to be in those markets very quickly, because if we're not, other people will be, and then they can become a threat to the UK market. So we want to be pretty aggressive on that. We see it as, this is the wonderful thing about this, is it's massively scalable and it's massively needed. And it does work in just about any market. There are a lot of complications. For instance, the Netherlands, their VAT rules make it a bit more difficult. There are all these things to sort out in each country. So it's not just a matter of switching on international currency and off you go. a big part of what we want to do. We need to be looking at launching in other countries next year, really.
Maybe just talking about community, because Ethex is quite community focused. Would a co-charging point be a viable option for a village hall association, for local residents at the village hall?
It is, and we're talking to people about doing exactly that. The closest we've got, we had to go through some extra hoops for the anti-money laundering for this, because you have to prove who the bank account belongs to, but we've done all that now. The first people to go live, it was a Methodist church in County Durham. And it's a lovely, actually, the business model is lovely. So if you've got, for instance, a terrace street in Plymouth, you can walk for an hour in Plymouth and not see a driveway. But at the end of that Victorian terrace street, the end terrace is quite often a dentist or a community centre or whatever. And they've got a car park that does nothing between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. or whatever it is. And it is a real no-brainer for them to put in you can get a grant for a staff charger or to offer it to your customers during the day. It doesn't have to be a fancy commercial one. It can just be a domestic charger, a few hundred quid. And then just put it on Co Charger. And that's 7 of the people down that terrace can then go and buy EVs, and they can have one night each, perhaps 8 or 9 if you use it at the weekend as well. So it's a really good model, the business one. The difference is that the domestic model scales. Every time someone buys an EV, that's a potential host, which enables 4 or 5 chargees. So that scales as EV sales scale. Car parks don't. So we're aware that it's a really big hit, and we're putting a lot of effort into it, doing a big project in Bristol on this, to show that car park model working, because that's very powerful as a quick hit to get EV ownership up in cities, or in, like you say, in a village with Village Hall, but it won't scale. So it's probably something that's going to be focused for the next 2 years, and then it will shift to other more on the domestic.
Lovely. Okay, so let's talk about the business model a bit more. So you mentioned that the average order value is £4 to £15, and you charge a 12% commission.
Yeah.
After that, payment processing costs and general overheads, you'll be left with 6 to 7%.
Yeah. Which
so,
sounds very little, but yeah. It's a bit like if you could take just a tiny percentage every time somebody charged their mobile phone. Because we're talking about a market of 15 million people just in the UK. So actually comparing it with retail margins, which might be up in the sort of double figures, 6 or 7%, we've modeled it all over the place. We've had to find that balance where it's plenty to run and expand the business. And the models show that actually, yes, it scales very well. But we've got to keep it low, because we've got to make it seem like a no-brainer for the user. There is a danger, we've not seen any evidence of it yet, but if we were charging, as some destination charge sharers do, 25%, you would get someone making an arrangement with their neighbour and go back to what I was doing, which is putting a fiver through the door. Fact is, it's a complete pain in the neck to do that. By the time you've arranged your own bookings and done calculations, and forgotten it's a pain. It's got to be low enough that people just want to use it. And the primary aim here is to get people out of fossil fuel cars. And we're doing everything we can. We kept it really lean, really simple. There's no upfront cost. There's no subscriptions. There's nothing of that. It's just you charge your car and we take 10% plus VAT. And it's really important to keep it like that, because this is a cultural challenge, not a technical one particularly. It's all about culture and mindset and sharing. So yeah, that's why it's just 10% plus VAT.
So obviously that gives quite a lot of scale is incredibly important for you, and you have some ambitious growth targets that people will see from the model. So part of this seed funding is to allow you to expand and for you to, scale sort of exponentially in terms of your users. What's your plan? How do you anticipate doing that to achieve such ambitious growth targets?
Well, we've got a 6-channel plan, so we're engaging through normal B2C, which is going very well. The various tests on that show that with the extra funding, we're not quite in that sweet spot for marketing yet, and yet we're doing really well. Our PR coverage has been brilliant. We've got an amazing PR team who've had us on BBC News, Sky, you name it. Fully charged. We've done all that. That's going great. But also the online marketing and so on. We're ahead of acquisition targets so far by about a month, I think. That's before we've really hit the accelerator at all, which is what the funding's for. We need to accelerate now. But also the fleet market is massive. We are very embedded with central government now. They are listening. I've been invited onto 4 forums now, including the big EVs conference in London in October to speak with the minister on this sort of thing. So we're engaging with central government. We are expecting to see a lot of support from them. Local government, we are manna from heaven, as we're proving with the Bristol project. They're spending millions of pounds putting in public chargers when actually a few tens of thousands will get them hundreds of chargers if they use this properly. But also, I've done fleet, automotive. This is going great there, because obviously the car makers and the retailers are starting to realise they have got to stop people buying ICE cars, fuel cars, when they should be buying EVs. We're the perfect thing for that. Either, as I said, you make money out of your charger, so it makes it more affordable, or I can't charge at home. That's okay. Look, there's a guy around the corner from you who's a Co Charger host. So automotive as well. We're already talking to some energy companies. The wonderful, the poetic thing for me about this, I love this, is if you've got a host there and they've got, say, 4 charges, what you're effectively doing is you've taken the revenue that those 4 people were giving to big oil and diverting it through your renewable energy contract. There's a thing of beauty in there. So they love it because it means that they are getting more revenue to be Co Charger hosts. So we've got all that going. It's it fits. So we've got all those channels. We're putting people into the right seats to drive those channels, which again, use of the funds is getting really good people on board.
So related question perhaps. I mean, I think you're already mentioning this in terms of local councils being on board with this, because it helps to solve their climate targets, presumably by massively scaling up EV ownership. So presumably councils are very much on board with this, or no?
Yeah, well, not yet. Unfortunately, councils, it's this is obsession. It's called the mere exposure effect. When you've got some poor guy at a local council who's being attacked by a spider, some guy at a local council who's been given the poison chalice of, we've left it too late, can you hit us all these air quality targets? And let's remember, it's not just about climate change. Without going too soapboxy, 100 people a day dying from traffic fumes. This is a real driver. This is a race as far as we're concerned. And they're usually rabbit in the headlights. How the hell do I do this? They have got public charger companies saying, we'll solve this for you, we'll solve this for you. They don't understand that a public charger, say a public charger in Bristol, isn't going to help a Bristolian to go electric. It will help someone from Southampton or someone from Exeter. So we're going into those to explain, look, you can do this. It's a free hit. You just promote it. We don't ask for any money. We make our money 12% when people use it. So it's getting that across, but we're doing that. We've got really good traction in government, really good traction in the industry. The BRD model that we've come up with is now being, as of this afternoon, the EV Forum of the Renewable Energy Association, who are the driver behind policy, they are looking to adopt that. So we're actually kind of bringing the industry round to understanding EV charging better and being far more use case focused. So that's going to go really well. And that's when we think, with the Bristol project showing how we do all this, we can then use that as a template to go to all the other local authorities and say, here you go, put 50 grand aside for this and you can do this. It's looking really good.
And BRD model, sorry, I hit you
so
on.
BRD, base route destination.
Yeah, okay.
It's does what it says on the tin. That's taking hold really well, and we're leading things like we're going to kick off some studies on the psychology of this. How do you get someone from a sort of, I don't want to know about EVs, I'm going to listen to rubbish on the internet as to why I shouldn't do it, all the way through to I love my EV, I never shut up about it. We need to get those models into the industry so that people understand the importance of base charging. It's 90% of charging, it's what gets people in EVs. The other two just help people who are already stopped polluting. They're not the priority.
And you mentioned Bristol there. Bristol is one of our hotspots
Yes.
in terms of projects and investors. So is this available in Bristol? And
Yes, we've got loads of users in Bristol. There's a big project being run by Action Net Zero Bristol, who are brilliant. And what we're doing is just setting up demonstrators of various models. You mentioned the community centre one, the sort of the village one, the car park one, the individual, the domestic one, and lots of other sharing things as well, car sharing and so on. And just to demonstrate how if you use the sharing economy effectively, you don't need to spend a huge amount of time. You're reusing, you're upping the utilization of existing resources. So that charger, yours is probably in use, 5 hours a week? Let's make that 20 hours a week and get 4 more cars off the road. So that's what we're doing with it. It's going to be running over the next 6 months at least. We've got some huge partners on there, including Good Energy and Edwards, and it's looking really exciting stuff.
Another question in relation to parking apps. How does the margin compare with parking apps?
It's an interesting one. This is one of the comparisons we have with the destination charging. So there's a parking app that's saying we can do community charging through us, and they're hitting big problems, as you'd expect, because someone who's looking to buy an EV doesn't have a parking problem. They've got a car, they already park it. They're looking to charge it. So I think that parking apps have got a really important part to play in destination charging, because if you're going to the football match or you're going shopping, you pay to park your car because you need to park your car. So you're willing to pay for that. It's probably going to cost 3 times as much as the charge. By integrating charging into that, they're delivering quite an important service in destination charging. But you can't really use it for community charging because it's based on a distance model, one-offs, strangers, and you have to pay to park first. So I did try it on the, shall we say, the leading one of those, and I think it was going to cost me 28 quid just to park overnight before I'd even charge the car. So it's not viable from that point of view, but it's very important on a destination charging point of view. I see someone's asked about the BRD model. Perhaps we should put up the diagram at some point that explains that. But it's just that base route destination, 90%, 3%, 7%. Understanding that's what EV life is. You charge before you leave home with a full battery. You don't charge while you're out like you do a fuel car. Once you've got that sorted, it becomes clear as to how important community charging is.
Maybe we can provide a link in our
Yes, I can do that.
It just explains that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, so important.
And there's a question around street lampposts. So charging from street lampposts again.
Yes. Street lamppost is another kind. Street lamppost is one of the 2 types of charging that exist in 2 places on this model. I'll put the link up. They can be used. If you're brave, you can use lamppost charging as a base charging option. When I say brave, because of the 3 magic things you need, it delivers. They're quite low cost usually. They're convenient, but the dependable is a problem because almost none of them are bookable. In fact, as far as I know, there is no lamppost charging company that lets you book it. And usually they've got a fuel car parked in the way. That's going to change as there are more electric and fewer fuel cars. So they'll become more and more part of it. I think they're part of the same patchwork that we are. Community charging, the model we've got, won't work everywhere. There are demographics and all sorts that mean it only works in certain situations. It's still millions of people, but of the 15 million, we need lamppost charging. There's a great company called Charge Fairy. Okay, they only operate in London and it's quite expensive, but they will actually log onto your car. The car tells them where it is and where its battery's at, and they'll turn up with a van full of batteries and charge it while you sleep. That's another option. There's this patchwork of solutions. Ours is the only that gives you all 3, affordable, dependable, convenient. At the moment, someone may think of something else, but right now we're way out in front on that. But yeah, lamppost charge is really important. We're good friends with some of the people that put those in because they're doing an important thing. We also have some projects that we're kicking off that link us with the companies that will put gullies outside of terraced houses to a parking spot, where the council have realised that that's all very well, but if that isn't their personal parking spot, how do they know they can use it? and they not allowed, they can't justify doing a parking spot for that terrace because that's public parking. You can't, it's not justified. But if they say to that person, but if you're a co-charger host, that means another load of people in the street can also use it, then we can designate it charging only. So the council wins, the street wins. You know, it's that there are all these collaborative models that we're coming up with now that are going to be happening over the next 6 months to a year. They're exciting. Some of them just instantly scale. They're wonderful.
That's
so, yeah, lots of it. Hence all it's the 6 channels and people to run them all.
Yeah. Good. So listen, Joel, I think everybody hopefully has got a really good overview and a sense of what the organization's trying to do, you know, what the scale of the opportunity is, and, you know, your ambitions. Is just to finish, is there one thing that you want to say, or a question, you know, that I haven't asked you, just to round out?
I think it's mainly down to, I've always been a big fan of Juliet Davenport, and she showed that ethical business can be very good business. She's proved it again and again, and yeah, she's a friend of ours. And I think we're doing the same here. There is, you know, we are aware that to make this work, you've got to take first mover advantage and go like hell. Otherwise, other people of, shall we say, less ethical viewpoints may do it for us, and it won't be done to the end user's advantage. So I'm quite proud of the fact we've gone in 2 years from literally a sketch on a bit of paper to people using this. So it's a shameless, literally shameless bid to let's take this, let's get it global as fast as possible, because it's going to save millions of tons of CO2, not to mention particulates, air quality, we've showed that it works, we've built it, it's out there, it's working. So I just want to say thanks for listening, and any other questions, if people want a meeting to discuss it further, just get in touch.
Lovely, thank you, Joel. There's still a couple more questions coming from the audience, but I suggest we can take those directly afterwards. I think that was a really great overview and a wonderful way to finish. So thanks for joining us today, and you know, look forward to every success and speak to you again soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.